It's been a little over 2 weeks since my investigation started on the crowdfunding scandal of Em-8er, and it's nearing its close. A lot of people are really interested in this, and a lot of people are asking questions. A larger YouTuber covered it, and through their findings and their time talking with Mark, it really validates everything we talked about was true. There was about 600,000 crowdfunded in total over 8 years, when Mark himself said that a demo should take about 6 months and cost about $60,000, with only a little over 100,000 of that being transparent and visible. Mark took 2 years away from the development of the game while continuing to crowdfund it hard during that time, while making everyone think that he was developing the game and it was his full-time job. And lots of deception. We're gonna dig into all that. Remember, Mark's not making a game, he's just making a demo, a spiritual successor to a game he's already made called Firefall. And he's not the only one making a spiritual successor to Firefall. Look at this, it's called Nexus Drop. It's only been in development for a year and a half, and it appears to be a lot more feature-rich and just as far along as Mark is. It's one person, part-time, with no money, and it's a stark contrast to what's going on with Em-8er. In today's video, we're going to discuss the crowdfunding scandal of Em-8er. How did we get to where we are at today, and why it should not be surprising that Mark Kern is an absolute mess when managing money. We're also going to talk about what happens next. The whole thing is kind of jaw-dropping. I'm actually pretty proud of myself. I took on one of the largest voices in gaming, exposing a pretty large crowdfunding scandal, and it was just a bonus because it was Mark Kern. However, I invite anyone with their own views on anything to take a look at this and see what conclusion you come to. And my objectives were to bring awareness of this crowdfunding scandal, and I think that was successful. I got that man pretty rattled. I mean, he put this out in his Discord, and one of his backers responded with this.
And, to the game, I supported the game. And now I'm just getting about all these things that's happening on Twitter. And I guess, I feel like when you said that you were winning and you're pinged to everybody, it didn't really feel like winning.
Maybe winning is the wrong word, but we will win, maybe future tense.
That's just a taste of the statements and questions Mark has been getting about Em-8er. Keep in mind, lots of people have contributed lots of money with the expectations set by Mark that they would have this done in early 2018, or at least the demo anyways. Let's lay out a bit of history about Mark Kern, because with his history, none of this should be a surprise. Quick background on Mark Kern: he worked at Blizzard in 1997, he worked in Diablo 2, World of Warcraft, StarCraft, and he left Blizzard in 2005. His next step in that same year was to co-found a game development company called Red 5 Studios alongside 3 other former Blizzard employees. He played a big part in the development of the game Firefall and became the CEO of the company in 2008. So he wasn't the CEO to start, but he eventually got there. In 2013, Mark was removed from his position as CEO by the Red 5 board of directors. Mark would talk about this a little bit. He would say that he didn't accept a Chinese bribe. More recently, he said that the owners wanted WoW with guns and was offered bonuses if he agreed. He declined, and then they voted to remove him as CEO. If you ask other people, including multiple Red 5 employees, it was because he was a thoughtless man who was terrible with money. Which again is consistent with what we're going to talk about. I mean, listen to him talk about the notorious Firefall bus.
I'm gonna use the esports bus we've created, this gigantic 20-seat thing. It's got a built-in television studio, built-in server cluster, supports up to 3,000 players.
One of many unsuccessful ventures we'll be talking about. In September of 2014, he started a studio called MEK Studios. They got $1 million in seed funding for an Oculus Rift Minecraft-like project. But by May of 2015, he was gone from the company. There was talks of shadiness with Mark Kern and Voxel Knots, but so much has been deleted it's tough to track down. Maybe that's a topic for another video though. Sometime in 2015, Crixa Labs was established. Mark said this about Crixa Labs in 2017, that it was a company founded to develop both Crixa, the tabletop RPG, and now Em-8er, the video game set in the Crixa universe. So he's the CEO of his new company, Crixa Labs, right? Not exactly. The CEO of Crixa Labs is actually a 79-year-old person with the same last name as Marx. Now, I'm no lawyer, but I'm really interested to know if placing somebody in a CEO role that has no involvement operationally with the company is ethical. In June 2016, Mark Kern started a petition to make a spiritual successor to Firefall. You know, the game that he claims he's the creator of. And I'll even question that. Firefall was made by a team in which he was largely absent from. But his own ego wants him to take 100% of the credit for any success that it did have. Mark publicly tried to get Firefall to tank so he could buy cheap IP. Imagine a former CEO wanting all of his ex-employees to lose their job because of his own ego. His Change.org petition was really successful because people believed in Mark at that time. At this point, he was a big advocate for gamers. I think it's pretty clear that's because they're going to be his best customer. And there's a lot of things that Mark is really bad at, but one thing he's really good at is raising money. I should also mention that it looks like in January of that same year, he had a tax lien placed on his house for $265,000.
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money.
He launched his first Indiegogo campaign in the summer of 2016. It was for one milestone of forums, website, and art for Em-8er. They delivered that and moved to the next milestone a month later. The next milestone was asking for $5,000. They smashed that and got over $20,000. This is for a number of things, including starting to build some 3D assets. This is where things start to lose the plot a little bit. So the plan is to break up the funding of the game into deliverable, playable milestones. Currently, each milestone is designed to be funded and delivered in less than 2 months. Sounds like a reasonable plan. I'm sure it'll go really well. He's got a bit of funding. He believes in this milestone format, which is similar to what publishers do. You know, you get to a certain point, you get more money. Rinse, dry, and repeat. So Milestone 1 was completed pretty easy. Milestone 2, on the other hand, took about a year. Whether it's a year or a couple months, the reason why we're talking about it is Mark specifically designed his milestones to be completed within a couple months. After that goal is complete by the summer of 2017, he sets up another Indiegogo, this time asking for $20,000. Again, he smashes it out of the park for over $100,000. The ask for $20,000 was for a couple playable characters functioning inside and piloting the mechs, various suits, animation for the characters, weapon system concept and design, the first gun, basic shooting mechanics, scripting and coding, and sound and visual effects. That's what they were looking for from the $20,000, but remember, Mark blew that out of the water. At this point, that $20,000 was currently funding step 4 of 6 prior to the playable mock-up before the Kickstarter. And he even says no more funding's going to be needed and you'll get this as a reward. So as they continue to raise more and more money and exceed that $20,000 goal, Mark put some additional stretch goals in there, including a pile of things that are meant to appear in the final game. We'll see what happens there. And this is where it continues to fall apart. At $60,000 to fund the fully playable mock-up. $60K, this is it. We fund fully and don't have to do any more milestones. We create the playable mock-up Thumper encounter, call down a Thumper mining mech and defend it from waves of attacking Sea-Who shapeshifting between humanoids and beast modes. I've played the game, I don't see any shapeshifting. Fight a giant kaiju as it grapples with your Thumper and defeat it as the climax of the encounter. I didn't see any giant kaijus. This will be a demo for our future Fund the Full Game Team fundraiser to make the final game. So Mark says that $60K will fund the full playable mock-up. He also says it'll be done in roughly 6 months, and then another month or 2 from there, it'll be time for the Kickstarter. Life is good, right? So let's recap here. In July of 2017, Mark raised $114,000 between Indiegogo and PayPal donations. He says that in 6 months, the playable mock-up should be ready. A month or 2 later, that would be the Kickstarter. So 6 months from July, you know, we're looking at early 2018. A month or 2 later, the Kickstarter is still in early 2018. Now, the last update in the Indiegogo was in 2021. Finally, the rough draft of Thumping is next week. Remember, that was supposed to be included in that playable mock-up that was going to be done in early 2018. As well, A lot of the things that were meant to be done with that $20,000, including that playable mock-up that was used to drive that funding at $60,000, was not done and nowhere close to that playable mock-up. What was done were a number of things out of scope of that milestone, like a novel and tabletop game, but not even close to the playable mock-up. There was no kaijus, there was no shapeshifters, just a couple different sandboxes with some different features. Isn't this man supposed to be a gaming genius? Everything was pretty quiet until July of 2018 when Mark upgraded the website to allow people that backed this Indiegogo milestone to upgrade their package and pay more money. You can tell this was driven by some FOMO. Get these bikes. Bikes will never be available to anyone else in the entire game. It's only for the M3 backers. So at this point, it's been roughly a year after that M3 campaign. The one that was supposed to have that playable mock-up done in 6 months for that $60,000. And they raised almost double that. With almost double the funding asked for, I'm sure they're good, right? Nah, they're not good at all. This is the start of some really heavy phantom crowdfunding for his game. Sorry, not a game, but a demo whose only purpose is to do a Kickstarter to try to raise millions. If it's taken him this long for a demo, imagine a whole game. He also starts selling skins, which are pretty much just NFTs with no values. They're just pictures. He also starts selling Founders Packs from $15 all the way up to $1,500. Pretty much mirroring what was done on Indiegogo to raise money. So we got the M3 backers that were sold these different types of Founders Pack. After he met the goals in Indiegogo, he started selling the same packs on his own website to raise more money for that M3 campaign. But wasn't $60K supposed to fully fund the playable mockup, and there wasn't going to need to be any other milestones prior to the Kickstarter? What's this money for? No one knows because Mark never shared that. But all that's likely a drop in the bucket to what's coming. In June 2019, Mark starts a new monthly sponsorship program. Kind of like a Patreon program, but on his own website. He made that stuff up in the bathtub like moonshine. His crowdfunding subscriber numbers grow to at least 1,500 subscribers at $7.95 a subscriber per month. Right around this peak, he took 2 years away from development without telling anybody, while still collecting and soliciting massive amounts of crowdfunding to develop this demo. An absolutely crazy thing to think about is Grummz has admitted to raising about $600,000. Based on the information that we have, it looks like $250,000 of that $600,000 was crowdfunded at a time Grummz wasn't even working on the game. And he didn't even say anything about it until he was called out. He blamed it on medical issues with his kids. He willfully knew this and continued to crowdfund. He didn't have time to develop the game, but he certainly had time to shill the skins and such on Twitter. Grummz got paid about $250,000 not to work on his game for 2 years. Again, this is just for a demo to do a larger Kickstarter. This ties into the reports from Red 5 Studios where Mark would take extended absences all the time. It also ties into the stories of the mismanagement of money that we've heard. Fast forward to a little over 2 weeks ago when I did my investigation into Em-8er. Grummz got wind of it and said an anonymous YouTuber was spreading misinformation about him. Grummz was recently interviewed by a larger YouTuber named Echelon. Nothing we've said has been incorrect, from the stealthy fundraising reaching about $600,000. Mark took 2 years off of development, didn't tell anyone at the time, continued to crowdfund to the sum of about $250,000. We were right about the deception of $60K funding the fully playable mockup. We were right about the sole owner of Em-8er being someone in their late 70s. And the sole owner of Em-8er also had a debtor's lien put on their property in 2023. The company overall sounds pretty risky. As you can see, this whole situation is insane. Any reasonable person would look at this with so many red lights indicating that it could be quite a big scam. It's like Mark Kern, Em-8er's only full-time employee, gets paid and does the least amount of work possible. So for him to say that this is misinformation sounds like, well, misinformation from him. Mark also asked for my name and my address so we could chat. When I didn't give it to him and said, hey, you know what, I can call you Grummz, you can call me McDizzle, you can clear up any of this. He called me a pussy. So I became a backer of Em-8er. Popped in and said hi to Grummz when he was trying to record a marketing session. You know, as opposed to actually working on the game. It's a shame there's no PvP. Because these accusations have hurt Mark so much, he says he wants a redemption angle. And yeah, people like a redemption arc. Sadly, they don't like hucksters who show time and time again deception is their game. This sounds no different from 2017 when he needed $60K in 6 months to build this playable mock-up, to when he took 2 years off and didn't say a word until he got called out about it and continued to crowdfund upwards of $250,000, or when he got called out from me for his BS. Bro only seems to do anything when there's news about him being a huckster.
One more big score, we got enough money to leave.
What's the plan for Em-8er going forward? What has Grummz said? Well, it's the same old story from him. Oh, we're gonna start doing something now. Isn't it just the same deception he's used for the last 8 years to do minimal work and get paid as much as he can? But the fun's not over yet because the demo isn't even done yet. Maybe he won't wait for a good demo to do a Kickstarter. Maybe his next step will be to do a Kickstarter or his own internal fundraising. He's mentioned he's worried about his Kickstarter getting canceled because of getting reported. Well, what are my next steps? I've done my initial investigation. It was deep, it was pretty thorough, and I think it yielded some interesting results. I'm going to keep a close eye on the development of Em-8er, and I'm going to report on the results. Also, Grummz definitely disabled my subscription perks that I was paying $7.95 a month for. I guess he didn't take too kindly from me popping into his marketing video session. I'll be keeping an eye on that too, because I couldn't find a way to cancel it, so if I get a charge on my credit card, we're going to be talking. In his recent interview, Grummz said one thing that sounded kind of admirable. He wanted to leave a legacy for his kids. And he has some accomplishments he should be proud of. He worked on a number of games that are really loved by a lot of people. But I think in 2024, it's fair to question Mark Kern's contributions to game development. Remember, Mark Kern didn't create World of Warcraft, he was part of a team that made World of Warcraft. Mark Kern didn't create Firefall, he was part of a team that created Firefall. However, he has a number of notable failures, such as being the CEO of Red 5, being one of the founders of MEK, and being involved in one of the largest gaming crowdfunding scandals that's really been around. Is there bigger ones? Of course. Is there a conversation to be had with Star Citizen on one hand, because they've raised millions upon millions of dollars? But this is about accountability to the people that crowdfunded you, deception, transparency, predatory business practices, which are another big problem in gaming overall, but you're not really talking about that a whole lot. I mean, how can you say out of one side of your mouth that you're an advocate for gamers and the other side of your mouth employ these incredibly predatory monetization processes, selling a bunch of stuff that doesn't really exist? And of course, the litany of other things that we talked about. In fact, there's perfectly reasonable discourse that you are scamming gamers. While Mark talks about completing this game being a legacy for his kids, you have to stop and wonder, is his legacy going to be completing this game even if he completes it? Or is it going to be being a creep about belly buttons and impregnating girls young enough to be his child? Or is it going to be his social media influence? Which from an optic standpoint, as we heard earlier in the video, doesn't make a lot of backers happy. Not so much what he's talking about, but the fact that he has the bandwidth to tweet all the time, but not the bandwidth to work significantly on his game, or demo. Not saying he can't do both, but he's obviously not doing both. That said, his social media activity has been a bit quieter the last couple weeks. That's what happens when a man's gotta work. At the end of the day, Mark Kern's legacy is gonna be a lot of different things to a lot of different people. But one thing that's pretty clear to everyone at this point is he's demonstrating all the bearings of a huckster. Just your standard snake oil salesman. Maybe he'll partner with some streamers. I heard Dr. Disrespect is into things that are in development. Maybe Em-8er's a good fit for him. Well, we're going to keep a close eye on Em-8er and going to report back to you how the progress is going over the next few months. Those are my next steps anyway. I appreciate all your kind words and support. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll talk real soon.